perfume and clothing from France from the 19th century, in terms of shipyards in England from the 18th century, and dictionaries of curses and of manners. You cannot imagine. And I brought there, last time we were, I think, 15 translators and the poor writer, and we sat there for a week. And it went like that. I read a paragraph, and then I paused and waited. And then they started to murmur and to whisper and to consult amongst themselves, and maybe this word should be like that, or this will be like that. And it was, you know, for a whole week, we did something totally spiritual, which is a great pleasure. And it was a way of giving them the book, and I think because they were able to hear me read it, and it's always very important for me, the musicality of every paragraph that I write. Maybe because I worked in the radio from a very young age. But I think literature is also about music. And if you find the right tone, and it's not easy to find, and because of that I write version after version after version, sometimes to the end of the land I wrote 28 times, and when I wrote, I either wrote it, because the first versions I write like that, longhand, and then computer, but I never cut and paste. I really, each paragraph and every page I will type and retype again and again, because I believe that whenever I retype or rewrite it, I notice another nuance of reality that I overlooked before. And when we sat there in Strahlen, it was so interesting to see the difference of attitudes of different translators, because, for example, at a certain point, my wonderful German translator, Anne Birkenau, she said, no, this sentence is too sentimental. This is almost kitsch. And immediately the Italian and the Spanish translators jumped on her and said, no, it's not sentimental, it's emotional. It's the exact feeling, exact sensation, you know. So you could have seen how translation is a matter of the psychology, not only of the language or the culture, but also the person of the individual who translated. And bear in mind, the translators are usually very, very lonely people, because they are the only one in the country who are working on this book at the time. So suddenly they were able to, you know, to connect, and they started, I think, they have now a kind of a support group against me. They are very active about this, you know, these connections. And to your question. We all grew up on translations. We all read translations from countries that we had no idea how people talk, what are their associations. When we read Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or Virginia Woolf or Kafka, we did not really know how every word echoes in their language. What are all the implications and all the associations and all the residues of significance that have accumulated over the generations, and this word carries it. But we read it, and we liked it, and there was probably in the books that survived the centuries, there was this special mixture of the exotic and of the intimate. I think this is what makes it. This is what allows us to really feel that we decoded something even without really understanding it. I always think, when I finished writing the book of intimate grammar, Sefer HaDikduk HaPnimi, it's a book about a family, a small family in Jerusalem in the 60s, and very much resembles my own family. And before I published the book, I thought it's only fair to allow my parents to read it. And I brought it to my parents, and my father read it, and he said, you know, David, at home I'm David. You know, David, it's a very nice book, but do you think that anyone out of our family will be able to understand it? And I thought it's so sweet of him, you know, and these are the books I like to write, that people will ask, that my father will ask, do you think anyone from out of our family can understand it? Now, whenever there is a new translation, let me boast, in Chinese or whatever, Japanese or Finnish, I come and I show my father, I tell him, you see, Abba, they understood, you see, they understood. Other questions?
Did you have another question, Yuval?
I want students to ask, but I'll ask just one more thing. You were describing before how you think that what an author should do is go into his characters and tell their story. And I don't know if there's any way to tell this, because this is part of what we've been discussing in class. How do you think, how the other thinks, and how can you appreciate the other? This is something that we're not able to do in our daily lives, mostly not on an individual level, not between nations. I don't know if you haven't answered this. Can you elaborate a bit about how it is that you do it? How are you able to be a stand-up comedian and an old Arab and a child and a woman? What is like the process that you go through in order to actually understand how the other feels, thinks, experiences life?
I am not sure I am able to really explain it, because part of it it just happens, and but maybe it happens after some effort or some tuning. I think this is the word tuning, to tune myself as much as I can to other people. I remember that I remember when I was writing Someone to Run With, and I was looking desperately for a character that will be the young female character, Tamar. She's 16 years old, and I couldn't have found her. And I was walking in the streets and looking really hungrily, hunter-likely, to find someone that will be Tamar. And then I remember I entered the computer store in the mall next to my home in Mevaseret Zion, just next to Jerusalem. And there stood a girl. She was, I thought, 15 or 16. And I saw her from behind, like as if I am my hand, and I'm watching her, and I saw only this part, and there was something both strong and fragile in this part of her, something very tender and yet tough, as if she was like, you know, a street girl or something like that. And she had she was dressed all in a jeans that was a little torn, I think. And I looked at her and I knew she's Tamar. I just knew that she's the one. And I flew out of the store because I didn't want to hear her voice. Her voice was already too much for me. And then it started. Then I was able to start writing her, because suddenly there was something concrete in reality that I could have tied myself to, and I was able from her presence and from the validity of a real human being, I was able to start to draw some elements and some layers of her personality. I was able to start to project on her, but it was not even to project on her, as if it came also from this hint that I got from reality. And I think that what I try to do is just to bereft myself layer after layer after layer of being me, of being protected from others. Because, I mean, if we admit, we are usually quite protected from others. Even, well, you know, let's exclude the company here. You are much better people than I am. But usually in places like Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, we, you know, even the people we love, I think over the years, you really start to have these layers of cataract on yourself, that you are not totally penetrable by others, and you will be very reluctant to give away yourself totally to others. Maybe it's even a kind of instinct of survival that we develop over the years, over our life experiences. And when I write, I feel that my movement is in the other direction, just the other direction. I want to be invaded. I want to surrender to the options of other people, even when they are in real life, they are dangerous to me, they are my enemy, they can defy me, even when they are the commander of a extermination camp. I want to get inside myself to this very last place where from this place I will be able to emerge again as him or as her. I know it might sound very abstract, but it is abstract. It's something that is an abstract process. And it has to do with giving up my defenses against. I remember when I was writing To the End of the Land for the first 2 years, I was unable to know Ora, really to know her as you know a woman. Yeah. I was unable, and all the time I felt she does not surrender. And then I did what every reasonable person will do. I sat and I wrote her a letter. You know, really asking her, why are you like, why don't you surrender? Come on, am I not a nice person? What keeps you from giving yourself to me? And I think from the very first words I realized that I was mistaken all the way. It's me who have to surrender to her, to the option of Ora inside me. And it was so simple, and it went from that moment on, it went so smoothly because there was an aura inside me. Aura in Hebrew is light. Or is light, yeah? Luchas. One of the first words a baby learns, yes. F-O-O, where is light, where is light? And then suddenly I realized this aura, whom she was not clear, she was not formulated to me before. But now, after I've written her, or have been written by her, I know her. I mean, I know when I think like Ora, when I behave like Ora, or when I behave like some of my characters, not all of them, unfortunately. Some fades away, fades out after some years, but there are always 5 or 6 characters that I wrote that are very active inside me, and I will tell myself, here you acted like Yael, here you did the mistake of Momik, here you are like this, like Aaron, don't be. and yeah, they are very much alive, and since I'm starting now, really, I started last week another book, hopefully, who knows. I know this pleasure of standing in front, the empty page, which I heard writers say it's the most frightening thing, and it's a fantastic thing because everything can happen, everything. Until I write the first word, everything can happen. Then things will start to narrow down to a certain direction. More questions. I thought there would be discussion and I will just react. That's what you said.
No, just a follow up on that one.
Just real quick, because we got
yeah. Was there any real aura stimulus, as you said, of the young woman? Because you succeeded so brilliantly in that character. I've never read a male author who so brilliantly penetrated a female protagonist as you accomplished in that. Was there any, other than your imagination, were there bits and pieces?
I think almost always I take parts from reality and juxtapose them in a new way. And sometimes real people recognize themselves in a character. And sometimes they recognize themselves with another human being that they terribly dislike in life. But when they populate one literary character, they get along quite well, and maybe it gives them some ideas to reconcile. Again, I think that really in every one of us, almost in every one of us, I'm not talking about people who are so rigid and protected, but in so many people there are many options of other life. We all, when we started, we were like this empty page of paper, yes, empty paper, the white sheet, and everything could have happened to us almost. And over the years, we narrowed, yes, and we congealed, and we were led, or we chose to live one gender, one worldview. Usually we have one or two languages, and this dictates usually the way we formulate life to ourselves. We have one biography, and it shrinks over the years. And then when you write, you get this privilege to melt all this congealness, yes. And you can really see the places where you could have been this one or the other one, and again, this is a very pleasurable experience. I see how often people, they try to prove that there are not many, that there are only one, and people will tell you, what, do you see any resemblance between me and my brother? How could you think that even we are so different? Or me and my parents, it's two different words. Or Israelis and Palestinians will say about each other, you think we are similar? It's terrible that it's insulting for both of them. It's insulting. We are antipodes. Yeah? And when you write, you discover that this negative definition of yourself is so artificial, and that you pay such a heavy price, and you pay with your life. You pay for this self-limitation that you undertake.
Professor Steve Weiland, he's writing on Jewish literature, a book, and yeah.
I have to quote to you a line from David Gutman, who's this phenomenal American anthropologist, died a few years ago, once said, one of his essays, we study what we fear. He was describing scholars. That was an unusual point of view, but I've carried that with me for a long time. Similar to the way you say when you write towards danger. I'm just going to ask one question to his I got to get in an editorial comment that you're going to hate me for. That is, I'm going to side with your dad about the book about the family.
Yes.
Now this is cruel to do, but you talk in the interview you did with the Paris Review. You said this.
Okay.
The more I write, the more I find that the most personal work will be understood the least. People do not expose themselves easily to intimacy. So I draw from that the conclusion that the smartest people are the ones who can maintain big contradictions in their minds, right? Because that's sort of the opposite of what you were saying about your dad and the personal book.
No, I just said that I know that the most intimate writing probably is more demanding.
More demanding, yeah.
And it's always surprising for me that, how shall I say it, that my books do sell. Yes, no, really, because I think I do not complain, but really I think my books are very intimate, and they try to become more and more intimate, not in the sense that I reveal some deep secrets about myself, but in the depth where I want to be. Yes, I want to be in a certain place in my writing, and I know it's less and less popular today, and not because people are evil, but because less and less people are able today to read heavy, demanding books, or even in really authentically intimate book. People are threatened by intimacy. It demands something from them that they are afraid to give. I mean, they are willing to give a kind of a false intimacy that was or is formulated to them by the mass media. You know, the mass media creates this impression that we are all intimate and we share everything,
Right,
but
right.
there is something false, and mainly there is a kind of a manipulation of using one individual in order that the others will feel better, will feel superior, will feel the sweetness of self-righteousness. The intimacy of literature exists in another place that it's even hard for me to formulate, but I know that this is the place where I want to be, and I know that there will be less and less people who are able to follow me there.
Well, so let me ask a very different kind of question, a different situation. What might be called the digital situation.
Yeah.
Also a powerful force. Now there's an Israeli twist to this question. The Israelis were the first great cell phone users.
Yeah.
They were. I mean, the first country where it just took over. And we had an Israeli scholar, Eli Yassif, taught for many years at television.
He was my teacher.
He was? Well,
I
really?
think for a year, yes.
Now, many people here remember Eli.
Yeah.
We came here for many years, was a good friend of ours, still is a good friend of ours. I picked him up at the airport 15 years ago, and we're in my car, and I'm driving on the highway, and he takes out, it must have been a BlackBerry. He was very advanced in technology. It was a BlackBerry, one of the first BlackBerries. And he's thirsty, calls his wife, I'm sitting in the car, I didn't know anything. You know, I had no technology, I still don't. There's a phone. You know, so I'm driving, and he's got the BlackBerry, and he calls Israel from we're driving on the highway. I was impressed. Then he starts typing, and he's sitting next to me, and I can see him. And then he stops that, and then I'm still driving, and he takes the cell phone, and he's sitting like this. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm reading." And you know, the screen on the BlackBerry is this tiny little thing. He said he was reading. And I couldn't believe it. I said, how could he be reading on this little thing? Turns out not only was he reading an issue of Speculum, which is a very arcane journal for medievalists. I mean, it was the least likely thing you'd be, and he's sitting in the car on the highway reading Speculum. I mean, this was another world for me.
You still did not recover.
Well, I'm telling you, you can hear me. This is my Bob Dylan moment. Something is happening, and I didn't know what it was. Yeah. But it was very Israeli, too. I mean, it was cell phones, and he mastered them right away. So now this has become a big subject for me, the questions of visualization. And I'm wondering how you see the world of readers now. You referred to your granddaughter. She's 3. She already holds books, I assume. Paper books. Paper books. Paper books.
But she knows that on my cellular she can get, not books, but she would like to see. She knows already to do this movement, and she knows. She see the Jungle book,
Right.
and she knows that it's a very natural option for her.
You know, the joke in the U.S. is a little video that people show of this American. She's got a magazine.
Yeah.
She tries to swipe it.
Yes.
And it won't. But anyway, what I'm curious about is how do you see the impact of the digital transformation on yourself as a writer? You said, I was amazed to hear that you don't cut and paste on the computer.
Yeah.
Most people, that's the genius of the computer. So, but
I use it as a type machine.
Type machine, right.
Yeah.
But what about, how do you see your readers now? You imagine yourself having digital readers? And of course I'm interested in how you see questions of the shrinking attention span and the problems of reading now at a time, the explosion of media devices.
It's a huge question what you ask here, because really this is how our future is going to look like, and more generations are being born that they get their main information through the computer, and for them it's much more natural than the books that we grew up on. And it will be foolish of me to try to predict how the world will look like and what are the emotional effects and the effects on the way we think and the way we feel and the way we formulate ourselves. All this is going to change. I mean, it's very banal even to say it, excuse me. One thing will not be changed, and this is the urge, the need, or the instinct of the human being to tell a story, and against it, or in front of it, not against, the need of the human creature to listen to a story. This is primal. I think this is part of the things that make us human. We need, in a way, to organize reality also in a form of a story, because it allows us another way of understanding, sometimes even of being in the world, that no other way can suggest to us. And as long as that is being kept, I really don't mind, and it's not important if I mind or no, but what form it will take. I'm not really terrified by the thought that my granddaughters will read the books on the Kindle. It's okay, as long as they are able to keep this instinct of listening to a story, of experiencing something through a story, which is the great mystery, how it acts upon us, the story. And I think that a story is something that, if I had to define it, you know, from the thousands of details of information that are pouring towards us in every hour, every minute, every moment. How do we know that something is a story? I think there are two areas. One is that even if we have never heard it before, we feel as if it falls into a place within ourselves that was prepared for it. Even when we were not, we never heard it, as I said, we didn't know it exists, it falls into a place that waited for it. And the second criteria is that a real story generates within us an immediate need to share it with others, to tell it to others. And I guess this will be kept, and probably there always will be people who will insist on the reading books in paper. By the way, what is amazing that in Europe and in Israel, people are not reading books in computer. It's a very small minority. And they have not, the companies that are producing the digital, digital books and all that, they do not break through. They cannot really exist. I think that also here in the United States there is a decrease of the reading in
books are coming
Kindles.
back.
Yeah.
Eric Aronoff is a professor of literature in the Residential College of Arts and Humanities, and then we'll open it up, maybe beginning with students as well, to include them. Yeah.
Mine will be quick, I think, at least as a question. But first I'll say, I love that comment you made about not only the primal urge to tell a story, but that it's fundamentally human to want to listen to a story. I've heard the first before, the second is a really interesting idea, that you want to hear stories. I really like that. So many, in terms of my own encounter with your writing, it started for me with Sea Under Love. I read it as an undergraduate in '86 and was just kind of blown away by it, and ended up writing my own senior thesis on it. It seemed there were a lot of things you said today, and also reading Falling Out of Time that reminded me of Sea Under Love, partially having to do with mourning, also the formal challenges of the work. Both of them seem to be incredibly formally challenging. So I have a lot of questions about that. Also, when you talk about how dare I write about it, referring to falling out of time, it also struck me that might be a phrase that people might have thought about as you were writing about the Holocaust in the 80s. This was also kind of new territory. So I guess my broader question is if you could talk a bit about Sea Under Love in the context that we've been talking about. I might start with just the idea of how did you place yourself into that character of the Nazi commandant, which you referred to. That might be a place to start, but really I'm interested in Sea Under Love in that regard.
Thank you, Arik. You are right. I think there is similarity, at least in this way that I describe between the two books, similarity. How dare I write about it, especially I'm not a survivor from the Shoah. My parents are not survivors, so I'm not a typical second generation of the Shoah. My grandfather and grandmother came to Israel to Palestine then in the end of the 20s in the last century. And my mother was born in Jerusalem, so I'm not a second generation. And yet, I was haunted by the Shoah ever since I was a very young child. And I think my life has been heavily marked by it. And I think it has to do, the fact that I wrote this book had to do a lot with the birth of my eldest son, Yonatan. And I felt then, in the beginning of the 80s, that I will not be able to understand my life unless I write about the Shoah. And for me to write about the Shoah was to take myself and to plant me there, Sham, in Israel, in Hebrew, at least when I was a child, but also today they don't speak about Poland or Germany, we say Sham, over there. And I felt that I must experience or explore my unlived life, Sham, over there, as a father, as a man, as a writer, as an Israeli, as a Jew. All these I will not really understand unless I put myself Sham and try to know what would have had happened to me. Your English, come to me after the lesson. How would it be possible for me to be there as a Jew? What do I have to place in front of the total obliteration of my individuality, of my uniqueness as a human being, when all the things of uniqueness would have been taken away from me, like my name? I would have had a number tattooed, my family, my friends, my intimacy, everything. That I would have been reduced to the lowest level of flesh and blood to be exterminated. Would I have something to protect my individuality, to keep me alive, because I will remember maybe vaguely that I once used to be this person with a certain personality and certain life? What is the last thing that would remain of me, of the human being that I was in such a place? And it also was very important for me to understand how a human being becomes to be a Nazi. How a normal, average human being is able to become a mass killer or just a collaborator with this machinery of evil. Because this is what is so frightening, to think that the Nazis, most of them were normal human beings. Yes, it's easier when they are monsters, then we can make a distance between us and them and say, no, it will never happen to us. The problem starts when we realize that they were average, mediocre, usually, human beings.